Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. Um, got the usual group together. Lots of stuff happening, and lots of stuff has been happening for a while. But I want to start with this. Our intro is getting shorter and shorter all the time, but frankly, that's probably good. We'll get into the substance. So Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden sat down this past week and talked to in a small group setting, a very intimate setting. Talked to people from WeAreSC and some of the other publications. And I want to start there because um, that was an opportunity to ask some of the big questions that everybody wants to ask if they had a chance to sit down with those two guys. And I want to do it this way. We'll start with some big picture thoughts from Eric, who was sitting right next to Lincoln Riley, like they were best buds, and then we'll move on to some of the more specific questions. But Eric, let's start with this. What's your big picture takeaway from your sit down with Lincoln Riley the other day?
So they're all Lincoln Riley, Chad Bowden, positivity. Positivity, positivity. So my takeaway is that my big overall whole thing takeaway, they like where they are. Or publicly like what they're putting out, they like where they like the roster, which is done-ish, right? That's different. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing is that they've got 95, 6, 7, 8% of the guys that are going to be on the field in the fall. That hasn't happened before with this many early guys. The fact that it's college football, so who knows, but probably not going to have a bunch of turnover in the spring with a second portal and who's staying and who's going. So I think coaches they like that idea, right? We've got now all this extra time to get ready for the season, knowing, hey, we're not going to lose a starter at the end of spring, or we're not, we don't have to work in, 17 true freshmen in the summer and hope that some of those guys get it quickly and can go play right now. So there's a lot of positivity there. That's the takeaway from kind of what they said. Again, top down, kind of that's their thing. There's nuances and there's stuff like that in there about a bunch of different topics or things like that, but that's where I would start is that they're absolutely going into the season. We brought back the guys we wanted to bring back. We got the guys in the portal we wanted to get in the portal. We signed the class that we wanted to sign. And so that's what I think they're saying going into the season. Now, there's discussion, right? About did you do all those things? Is this roster better than 10 rosters that you're going to play in the fall? 11, is it up there in that realm? That's something that, we can discuss and we'll ultimately find out.
So, Greg, when coaches speak publicly, and this was a closed gathering, but they're speaking to people they know are going to then write and make videos like this about. So they're speaking publicly. We know that coaches have multiple audiences that they're actually speaking to, right? I mean, they're speaking. Yes, they're speaking to fans. They're speaking to the people who read WeAreSC. They're speaking to the people who watch videos like this, and that matters because it does. It may not be the number one thing in Lincoln Riley's mind, but Lincoln Riley knows that if the fan base sours on him, things get very difficult. So that's it. That's an audience, and it's an important audience. But they also have their own players. They have recruits. Uh, Maybe to some extent his own assistant coaches, right? So Lincoln Riley has a lot of different people that he's talking to anytime he speaks in a public forum. So my question for you, Craig, if Lincoln Riley says, I have the roster I want, it's experienced, I feel good about where we are, can we trust that's what he really believes? Or do we need to do some like Soviet era style trying to look through the Kremlin's pronouncements to figure out what really is going on? What do you think?
I think if I didn't know what happened the previous 4 years and I didn't pay attention to what he said the last 4 years, and I listened to what he's doing, he's providing hope. He's trying to sell everybody on the fact that this team is really going to be a special team. But did we not hear that last year? Did we not hear that the year before that? Did we not hear that they were going to be physical? Did we not hear this is the best offense, a good defense? You know, I don't blame him for what he says. I mean, he's certainly not going to sit there and say what he really thinks, but it really doesn't matter because in the end, we're going to know what's true and what's not true. I'll just say this. I wasn't overwhelmed by what he said. I wasn't underwhelmed by what he said. I just go, this is what he said. Did I believe everything? No, because I think that his record at this point in time tells me that I think that he said the things he should have said. His team is watching. His team. Look, nobody knows what's really happening more than his team because they're with them all the time. The coaches are there all the time. They see what's going on. So when he talks to whatever he's talking to, whether he's talking to WeAreSC or he's talking to his team or talking to other media people or alumni, I think everybody has a kind of an idea like, okay, prove it. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are two different questions, right? The first question is, does Lincoln Riley really believe what he's saying? And the second question is, even if he does, do we share his optimism, right? Those are two different questions and both are important. But Riley has a very optimistic style when he talks. He's the opposite of Lou Holtz, right? Lou Holtz would be preparing for a game against a 2-6 Navy team, and it would sound like Notre Dame is the biggest underdog in the history of football. Like, I don't know how we can compete with these guys. That was Lou Holtz's style. That is not Lincoln Riley's style. Lincoln Riley's style is to say, hey, we feel great about it. We're making great progress. The plan is in place. Um,
You
so,
know,
Mark,
Chris,
oh, go ahead.
before you go, uh, to your questions, does Lincoln Riley believe what he's saying? I think was kind of basically your first question. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
I think he wants to, but I
Mm-hmm.
think he really look at he is not a child. He's been in the big time football programs. He knows what it's all about. So deep down, he has a good idea. Okay. And what was the second one again? I'm sorry.
Well, the second one is whether we agree with
Well,
what
I've
he
already said
says. Yeah.
the jury's out on that for me.
Well, Mark, here's my thing though. I don't know if I agree with some of the things that Lincoln said. I don't know if I share his optimism in some of these respects, but based on what they did, or should we say did not do in the portal, that does seem to suggest that Lincoln Riley really believes that he has the roster he needs, right? Because there were guys out there at linebacker, at safety, who everybody who knows college football looks at and says, man, we should spend some money on that guy because that guy would be a difference maker in positions where we need it. And they didn't go after those guys. So the portal, I guess a lack of portal activity does seem to suggest that Lincoln Riley really does believe he has a roster he needs, doesn't it?
Sure. I mean, that's one side of the argument. He believes it. Look, I think a lot of people could agree that maybe, possibly, they spent a lot of money on their recruiting class. They didn't have the necessary resources to invest into the transfer portal at those positions of need that you're referring to, which makes them say, we like what we got. That's why we didn't do it. What I don't like, and I get it, it's coach speak, but it seems like the Lincoln Riley effect is kind of has kind of connected itself to Chad Bowden. Remember when, Eric, we were there, everybody asked Lincoln Riley, hey, any thoughts on the defensive staff, Alex Grinch following the Cotton Bowl loss? I just feel in my gut. I've seen it before. We know we can get it done. Chad Bowden says the same thing about the linebacker room. We've watched the film. We like the guys we have. Um, we feel really confident that these guys can get it done because we've seen it on film. And I'm thinking, which film did you see it on? Because nobody else has seen it. So it's just those types of things. We mention it all the time. We'd love to see the actions back up the language. And it just feels like USC is always trying to play catch up with itself a little bit.
Well, let's start with some of the things Lincoln's positive about that I think maybe our group would be largely positive about. He says he expects another significant jump from Jaden Mayava, who works hard and is a guy who is trying very hard to get better, and who he says did improve significantly from the sophomore season where he had four starts to the next season. Let's start with that. That seems to me to be a pretty realistic perspective, right? I mean, Lincoln Riley, when he's talking about quarterbacks, is talking about the thing that he knows best, and frankly, the thing that he does as well as anybody in college football. So if what Lincoln's saying is, I think Jaden Mayava is going to take a huge step forward. He has a bunch of returning starters on the offensive line and a lot more depth up there than we've had in the past. He has two excellent running backs. Receiver has less experience, but at the same time, receiver's a place where it's not that unusual for a freshman to come in and play. I mean, that can happen. That part of his spiel strikes me as pretty reasonable, right, fellas?
It is reasonable, but if we're being true ourselves, we say, all right, well, is Jaden Mayava going to get better? We anticipate he will. It'll be his third year in the system, 2-year starter. Basically, the next step for him is beating a good opponent on the road, because once you get Jaden Mayava leading the team doing that, this team can really, really, really take off. My question is this, because you brought up the wide receivers. There's going to be guys there. They're inexperienced once you get past Canuck Hines. And yeah, they brought in Terrell Anderson. I like that pickup. I know Eric is a big fan of Zacharias Williams, as am I, but we need to see them do that here at USC. So is Jaden Mayava going to be able to bail out his wide receivers the same way Makai Lemon and to a lesser extent Jacoby Lane bailed out Jaden Mayava last year? And the first game that comes to mind is that Iowa game. I mean, Makai Lemon was making some crazy catches that without him, I don't know if USC pulls that victory out.
Yeah, I mean, you have to start this conversation by saying you can't replace Makai Lemon with anybody on next year's roster, right? I mean, he is USC in the last 30 years. USC has had a lot of really good receivers, a lot of them. Probably as many as anybody, right? Ohio State can probably make an argument. Miami's had some great guys at that spot. Whatever. has been loaded at the wide receiver position, and Makai Lemon played about as well as any of those guys that we've seen in the past. So you're not going to have Makai Lemon working magic every week. But Eric, it seems to me that with yet another year of experience, a game probably slows down for Jaden Mayava once again. And he's going to have a very experienced offensive line. It seems to me that USC should rightly expect that Jaden Mayava will be one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the country, right? I mean, that's not a reach at all.
Yeah, he's the first guy I'd list if you wanted to make a list of who's going to be better next year, right? Like you talked about what Lincoln Riley has done at the quarterback position, how many defenses like coverages he's seen now, how many snaps he's taken. Of course, he's going to get better. How much better is a question, but that's what Lincoln said. It's not really even, wow, we need that guy to get so much better. It's just do what you did last offseason, right? Find this, work on those things, fine tune them, get better at these things, and then be better. I would The not the counter, but the other point I'd bring up about the wide receiver position being uh less talent, I guess, reliable. I don't know exactly what the word is, but like you're not going in
Proven.
saying, "Holy cow, these two guys are for sure gonna get it done this year." Yeah, proven's probably a fine word for that. But I'd counter that with you're bringing like especially the second half of the year playing the tough teams. That offensive line was who's ready to go this week? Like who's healthy enough to go out there? Your best running back, probably now best offensive player, is out for a lot of those games, and so you get any kind of like remotely average to good injury luck along the offensive line at running back. And I'll say that pretty well balances out whatever questions there are at wide receiver, and is again, I'd argue a bigger help to Jay Mayava running the offense and taking steps and that sort of thing. So that was one of the things that I had asked, the priority on bringing back all five offensive linemen specifically. And yeah, that was a really key piece. You don't have to go that far back to find an offseason where, hey, here's the one guy we can count on. Oh, wait, he's not here anymore. And so that is not something that happened offensively for USC at some real key positions.
USC's offensive line had about as bad a run with injury luck as you're ever going to see last year. And we all know how important it is to have continuity up front. Greg, my take is that when it comes to the offensive line, yes, it helps to have a Tony Baselli, obviously, right? A guy that is 6'7", 330, and with incredible feet and long arms, all that stuff, right? That's great. But when it comes to the offensive line, sometimes what you really need are guys who are experienced and are comfortable working together so you don't have missed assignments, right? I mean, especially in the interior where you just can't have guys, you can't have guys missing. Maybe not a left tackle, right? Left tackle is a different beast. If Elijah Page goes down, USC either has one of the two freshmen step up in a hurry, or I'm worried. But when it comes to the O line, we should expect the O line to be significantly better next year. Yes, I mean it's another year of experience, probably less injuries because I've never seen an offensive line have injuries like that. So it's pretty safe to expect that group to be solid. Yes.
Yeah, I think, getting a Anthony Munoz or Marvin Powell, Sam Baker, and some of the others that have come along, that certainly, that makes a difference. But I've always said it's the sum of the parts. And if they play well as a unit, they should be pretty effective. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be effective. I mean, experience is not a problem with this group. Excuse me. But I think based on what you've said, you never know with injuries, you never know with other things, but it should be a really functional, offensive line. It will be tested. They played some really good teams and programs. The first four games to me, you know, name the score in a lot of ways. Maybe less against Rutgers, in the games away back there, but when you start, going up against Ohio State and you start playing Oregon and you start playing those teams, that's when it shows just how strong are you. And they have to be strong if they think they're going to get in the playoffs.
This season starts in Game 5 when Oregon comes to the Coliseum. Because if you look at the schedule, you're going to have to beat, most likely, you're going to have to beat either Oregon or Ohio State at the Coliseum this year to make the playoff. I don't think you can lose both of those and count on beating everybody else, including winning at Indiana, right? So you're going to have to beat either Oregon or Ohio State, and that means that you're going to have to beat a team that can really bring it on the defensive line, because those teams are going to be able to bring it on the defensive line. But Look, Tobias Raymond at left guard is going to be very, very good if he stays healthy. Elijah Page at left tackle is going to be very, very good if he stays healthy. I'd feel pretty comfortable with Alani Noah at right guard. I think that, he's been up and down, but he's good. He's a guy who's going to bring a ton of experience. I feel pretty good about that spot. I think Justin T will make huge strides after getting as much playing time as he did last year. Probably a year too early. He has another year to get bigger and stronger. I mean, you look at it, you're looking at four places where you have guys who you expect will be stars or should or are capable of being big time collegiate players. And then you have a guy at center who may be a little bit undersized, but centers sometimes are, but he's smart and he works hard and he has a ton of experience. Look, that sounds to me like a hell of a group, which is why I was not on board with USC going out and trying to find some, interior offensive linemen, because I figure the guys they have are probably better than the guys they'd be able to afford in the portal. And if you had to take Cola J or Pepe and put in one of the guard spots for a few games, they'd probably be just fine anyway. So on the offensive side, when Lincoln Riley says we're pretty experienced, I think we're pretty good, right? I mean, he recognizes at wide receiver and tight end, he's going to have some guys make strides early. But he's got some guys there that you think could play. That part of his discussion struck me as pretty reasonable. And I was nodding my head saying, yep, that sounds right. I think you're right, coach. I think you're going to score a lot of points. And I think you're going to be able to score even against Oregon, even against Ohio State. You may not put up 40, but you're not going to get, you're not going to get held to 10. It's not going to happen. You're going to move the ball and score points. That's not the part of the conversation that everybody's worried about. Now, Eric, very early on, I think it was you, asked about the linebacker room. And Lincoln Riley's response essentially was, I'll never, I'm not going to say that we'll never add somebody to that room, but we feel really good about the room. And we think that the young guys that played last year really made huge strides. He mentioned specifically Des Stevens the way he played the second half of the year. And so he thinks he has a linebacker room that is ready to go. And when we say ready to go, let's be clear. Lincoln Riley said, you don't come to USC to hope you win 8 or 9 games in a season. Chad Bowden said, if you're at USC, you need to be in the playoffs. So both guys are saying that a 9-3 season when you miss the playoff is missing the mark. They both were very clear about that. Lincoln Riley thinks he has the linebacker room against this schedule to win 10 games and make the playoff. Eric, I think he's crazy. Argue for Lincoln Riley here because I have no idea what he's talking about.
It's the room that very clearly needs the biggest jump from last year to this year. And that if you want to separate the defensive ends from the tackles, then we can have an argument that it's the ends, the linebackers. But as far as impact on a game, week to week, and being a problem for offenses helping to stop the run, that needs a big jump. And it's one of the ones where the coaching change will be very interesting to watch, because if you're betting on, hey, these guys saw a bunch of snaps, they got that experience, now we think we have a better coach who can develop it and help them see it and all that sort of stuff, you're not going in, you're like, to leave it the exact same and just say, hey, we hope it's better, would have been, I think tougher to swallow. I think the fact that there is a change, there's a new voice in the room with Mike Eckler coming over and taking over a linebacker room. I can, again, what I have gone at, like Devin Bryan, I think can play some linebacker. He's not, if you look at kind of the rankings and who are the guys that made the most money in the portal and who got the most offers, as a linebacker, he's not that guy. But I do believe when Chad Bowden says like linebacker is one of those things where a lot of times you don't see it before the play starts, right? Two guys can walk on the field, they look completely different, and then once the snap goes, you can go, "Oh, that guy can play linebacker." Right? It you don't need to be 6'4", 250, that sort of thing to do it. I can understand that argument. It still doesn't feel like you're going into the season at this point with the idea that yeah, these linebackers are going to be able to control a game. It needs a gigantic step forward, and if they can if they can get some defensive tackles that can play like defensive tackles in front of them, that can be a help because that's as much as you want to hit the linebackers, and yes, there were some snaps in there where it's just like that can't be where you go on that play. I don't care what the call is because sometimes you just don't know what the call is. Most of the time, almost all the time. But there's times where it's just nobody could play inside linebacker behind what the defensive tackles are doing on that play. Nobody would make a play based on what the defensive tackles are doing there. So it all has to work. It all has to get better. And the talk about like we know who these guys are and the culture and the work ethic and all of that sort of stuff. I don't I don't sit here and go it's absolutely going to fail. It's for me has the if you want to again list all the rooms, it needs the biggest jump and maybe the lowest like probability that you're gonna be one of the best groups in the conference next year.
Mark, go ahead.
So here's my issue. This is not me hating on Desmond Stevens or Jaden Walker or even Devin Bryant, who they brought in through the transfer portal, Tamir Robinson, who apparently was banged up last year, or Eli Newby, who just can't get on the field for whatever reason. They haven't put him on the field at linebacker, great at special teams. When everybody knows that that room, as Eric said, needs to take the biggest leap, you need to have guys who were born and raised as linebackers. Desmond Stevens is technically still learning the position. And if you want to be a playoff team in the Big Ten Conference, you can't be learning the linebacker position, kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater type of situation. Go make it happen. You need to go and get a bona fide tackler who's played linebacker, who's strong against the run. And there was at least 3 or 4 guys out there in the transfer portal. And it just feels like USC settled. So that's where my challenge is. I think Mike Eckler is going to have a big effect on the room. I think there are athletes. I think they have some talent. I just don't know if they should be learning how to play linebacker at this level. Either you know how to play the position or you don't. Eric, you talked about the size, and that's why I said it's not about Desmond Stevens himself. But if he's only been playing linebacker since he got to USC, maybe you need to, bring in guys who understand the position that those guys can learn from.
Yeah, that's all reasonable, Mark.
I thought so.
Yeah, and look, here's my issue. USC's had other linebackers that played other positions in high school. Matt Grudegood played safety in he played safety and running back and quarterback and a little bit of everything in high school because he was the best high school football player in the history of the state of California. Maybe an exaggeration, maybe not. But how long did it take Matt Grudegood to learn how to play linebacker? I think it took him about 8 minutes. They put him at linebacker, and he very quickly had linebacker instincts. He knew where the play was going to go, and he was there. He was playing downhill. He was filling holes. He was making plays almost immediately. My issue is that if you believe that the guys USC has at linebacker are good enough that USC can win 10 games against a brutal schedule, you must think that Rob Ryan and Danton Lynn really screwed those guys up last year. That's what you'd have to think. Because this is not the usual progression. Like Jay Mayavi, you got the usual progression you'd expect from a guy who has talent, who's coached by a good coach, right? He comes in, he does some stuff his first year where he starts 4 games where you say, okay, that was a beautiful throw. That was boneheaded. This guy needs to figure out how to play. Last year, a lot less bonehead play, still some, but a lot less, and a guy who's more comfortable. This year, you'd expect more. This is a natural progression. You can't have a natural progression from last year's linebackers and win 10 games next year. You have to have a dramatic leap forward. Greg, can you really expect, as good as Gary Patterson is, as good as Mike Eckler is, and I think we both agree those are good football coaches, can you expect them to come in and have those linebackers go from just a gigantic liability against the run? And that's what they were. And if you tell me I'm wrong about that, I'm just going to tell you, you didn't watch the games, you don't know football. They were a gigantic liability against the run just about every week. Can you expect that those two coaches come in and make and help those guys take a gigantic step forward, which is what has to happen? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's reasonable
Okay.
because I've seen enough, whether it's football or it's basketball, whatever, that you get coaches that really have a system. Sometimes players fit in. Some guys can't, and let's use basketball as an example. Some guys teams are not good man to man. They're just not. For whatever reason, they're just not. But you put them in a matchup zone or a zone defense, and all of a sudden, as a group of five, they're very difficult to score against because they all have less places to deal with. And if they just take care of their area and do what they're supposed to, you got a good deal. Even in football, you can change the philosophy to fit a player. Look, the word on Gary Patterson is a lot has to do with his safeties and the secondary and if that's really going to be the case, maybe the idea of linebackers will give the linebackers more to do but less responsibility, so to speak, or should I say more responsibility but less to do, because I think that Patterson will know how to deal with it. And I think it was mentioned here about the defensive line. That's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. Uh, I think they've got the talent to do it. I really do. Uh, and I really expect we're going to see some big changes. Because if we don't, we know what to expect. We'll say we've seen that before. So the elephant in the room, to me, is a positive elephant. And Gary Patterson and his coaches, that they're going to change things. And the more we see assistant coaches changes, the more they're going to understand the system to teach it to the players. So, I'm actually have a positive outlook. And let's face it, they have 4 games to get it right, at least where they should be in their aggressiveness and what have you, before they really play Oregon and Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's going to be a benefit for them. We'll see when they play Oregon, what they learned in the previous 4 games is gonna show up.
I guess the big question is whether the last year's linebackers lacked the instincts you need to play the position, or whether they were given too much to do and were confused. Because they often look like guys who just didn't really know what they were supposed to be doing, and they were,
Exactly.
instead of attacking, they're sort of standing around trying to figure out what should happen. At which point, a 320-pound guy smashes them in the face. Um, and so I guess that's the question. And Eric, if nothing else, when you hire a guy like Gary Patterson, you're hiring somebody who really knows teaching defense to college kids. I don't know if that's, I'm not saying Denton Lynn didn't, but we don't know that from his resume. One thing you know from Gary Patterson's resume is this guy knows teaching defense to college kids about as well as anybody. He's been doing it and doing it successfully since I was in high school. That's not an exaggeration. Now I'm a very, very young man. That's still a long time ago. So, Eric, that's the kind of hire you want if what you're saying is we got some guys who have ability. Desmond Stevens has ability. He has enough size. He can move. He's not a bad tackler. He was pretty good against the pass in space. Can you find a way to get this guy to play downhill so we can stop somebody in the run game? If you give that task to Gary Patterson, I suppose there's a possibility he can pull it off, yeah?
And there's a lot of emphasis on safeties, right? I mean, the 4-2-5 and using three safeties and all that sort of stuff with Gary Patterson. TCU under Patterson churned out NFL linebackers. I mean, churned like on a scale of USC. When you look at it, who does TCU recruit at that time and who does USC recruit at that time? TCU is like step for step NFL linebackers with USC right there. So that's one of those eye for talent development, that sort of stuff where you need that from Gary Patterson right now. Like you need him to come in and go, yeah, you can play in here. No, you can't play in here. Yeah, this is going to work. No, this is not going to work. And I think he shows up with kind of the bona fides, right? To be able to say like, no, no, this guy from the bench, like you can play in this. Like I can find a way to use you. That's what I'm most curious about defensively. It's great to get starters and snaps and all of that stuff back. Is there a guy that he goes, no, 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 that's my guy. This is the guy who's going to play. And I don't know if that's specifically a linebacker or defensive back, or if there's a safety that suddenly like works. And I mean, Jaden Walker, Desmond Stevens, they both have, safety background. And when you start talking about a third safety that's close to the line, and we want to maybe get bigger at that spot, like there's ways that those guys can be used. And so I don't know that it's fair to sit here early February and say, well, they're going to roll the same guys out next fall that they ended the season with, or that kind of struggled in some of the games. The Notre Dame lineup is going to roll out their game one and play the same. I think that Gary Patterson again has earned sort of the benefit of like, let's see with this roster, because I'm not gonna say it's one of those things where you used to hear USC fans, right? Oh, our third team would start everywhere in the Pac-10 or Pac-12 or whatever. And there's probably a guy who's a young guy that's not playing yet that could go play somewhere. Like that's not it. So I'm not gonna sit here and go every single guy that Gary Patterson has at USC is better than every single guy that he had at TCU. But I'll tell you what, when Gary Patterson had those TCU teams, he'd probably take every guy at USC and say, let me see what I can do with this guy. So here's his opportunity to go do that, to go teach defense and to give them things that they can do, right? And so I think there's a long time between now and when you really have to prove it, where yeah, I'm not. I don't think I'm ever going to get to a point where the season starts and you go, yeah, these are first team linebackers are rolling out for USC, or first team all conference linebackers are rolling out there. But yeah, I still believe, because of what he's been able to do, that he can find a way to get something out of that position group and have it be a step forward from last year.
Yeah, look, he had good players at TCU because he did a good job of recruiting the guys that Oklahoma and Texas didn't want, but he knew they could still play, right? He was great at that. But he was not recruiting Jakeem Stewarts at TCU. He wasn't getting Jamie Winfield. He wasn't getting Luke Wavels. He wasn't getting Elbert Hill. He wasn't getting those guys. And so it will be interesting to see what he can do with guys who have future NFL, not just future NFL talent. The guys that I just listed, those guys have future first round talent. Now, whether they'll turn into those types of players over the next 3-4 years, I don't know. But that's the sort of talent they had, and you didn't get those guys at TCU. And so it may very well be that with those pieces, his defense looks very good. I know he's serious about stopping the run. You can't listen to Gary Patterson talk or read any of his presentations without him stressing, you have to stop the run first. You have to. If you don't do that, nothing else matters. This is true, and it was the mind-boggling thing about Denton Lynn at times last year, because there were times when he did, right against Nebraska. He's bringing run blitzes, he's getting guys in the box, he decided to stop the run. but at South Bend, where they have a freshman quarterback and the best pair of running backs in the country and a really good offensive line, you'd say, we can't win this game unless they can find a way to hold Notre Dame to say 160, 170 yards rushing and make the freshman beat it, right? You know that going in. And from the outset, USC's in a light box and playing soft at linebacker. It's like, okay, what was the point of practicing last week? Like, what are we even doing here? Why did I fly out here to sit in the freaking rain if we're not going to commit to stopping Notre Dame's running game? It's like, what are we doing? I'd be surprised if we saw that from Gary Patterson. Now, Greg, is Gary Patterson the sort of guy who's going to be able to take guys who USC has some talent at edge? Cam Crawford is an immensely talented kid. Braylon Shelby is a talented kid. Luke Wafel is young, but he is physically ready to play today. USC hasn't had a threat off the edge probably since Thule, it seems to me, right? A guy, it's not that those other guys don't sometimes make plays, but they haven't had anybody in the roster that offensive coordinators say, okay, we have to know where that guy is because we have to have a plan to block him that doesn't involve just hoping that the guy who happens to be in front of him can handle the assignment. It's been a long time since we had that. Is Gary Patterson a guy who's going to be able to take Cam Crawford, for example, and turn him into from a guy who sometimes flashes but disappears for a quarter at a time into a guy who's really a terror off the edge? Because look, USC needs that if they're going to be good defensively this year.
I have a lot of confidence in Gary Patterson. I don't care that he was a head coach or what have you. He was brought in because he's an elite defensive mind. And if he's going to tell these players, this is what you're supposed to do in your position group, okay? And he's going to make sure those assistants are doing what he wants. I don't think he's going to sit there and say, well, I'm just a figurehead. I don't think so. We've already seen changes on the defensive staff. We could be seeing more changes on the defensive staff. And my feeling is no matter how much I agree with you in terms of Cam Crawford, the bottom line is Patterson's not going to care about potential at this point. He's going to say you've already had a couple of years. Now you have a chance to really do well in what I'm doing, and if you don't do it, I'm putting in somebody else that's going to do it. And that's where I get excited. I figure this guy is going to say you'll either do it my way, the right way, or you ain't playing. And you know something? Lincoln Riley, he's not going to, we already know his strengths and we know his weaknesses. And the bottom line is he needs that defense to rise up and be really, really effective. And he's going to let Gary Patterson do almost anything within reason that Gary Patterson wants to do. Because if it doesn't happen and their defense doesn't make a big jump, I'll say it, Lincoln Riley might not be the head coach at USC the following year. And, after 5 seasons at $1 million, whatever he's making a season, they're not going to put up with
He's
it.
making about $1 million a game, I think.
Exactly. And you know what? SC, if they're serious about football, and I think they are, and I think they've proven it. I like the athletic director. I like Bowden. He knows what's going on. They both know what's going on. And they're going to say, we can't sit there and do this. And I'll end with this. To me, looking ahead to 2027, I say bull cheese. I said, you know what? You've had so many years to get to this point. If you would have walked into the Coliseum when you first took the job and said, look, I think we'll be in the playoffs in 7 years. You know what people are going to say? You're not the coach. That's not USC. And that's how I feel about it.
Well, look, you're not the only one that feels that way because Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden were pretty clear about it the other night. And this is the nice thing about it. Whether they're right or not, we'll see. We'll see the last Saturday of September, I think, is when we're going to start to see whether they were right or not. But I think we can put one thing to rest. We can put to rest the idea that because of the immense challenges USC had with lack of NIL, with the bad roster that Lincoln Riley inherited, that USC is still not in a position where it could compete. That's not the message that Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden delivered the other night. The message they delivered is, we have the roster we like This is a group that can get it done. And when pushed on, well, yeah, but there's a lot of inexperience, they said, no. Lincoln Riley said, no, actually, we have plenty of experience too. So one of the things that frustrated me a little bit last year was you had to talk about the defensive line, and then the defensive line did not perform. And afterwards, a lot of USC fans made excuses for the coaching staff and said, well, the coaches weren't pumping up the defensive line. That was the fans getting excited. That wasn't true. And I showed it over and over again by quoting these guys in articles. Listen to me, USC fans. I don't want to listen to that nonsense next year. If USC doesn't play well, it's not because they needed yet another year to build the roster. Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden were very, very clear. They have the roster they like. They think they can win with it today. It is talented enough. It is experienced enough. The excuse time is over. NIL was bad a couple of years ago. He has the roster he says he needs. That's good. That means we can put aside all that other stuff and just see how they play. And maybe they play really well, right? I mean, if Gary Patterson makes a difference, this is a team that could win a lot of games. But let's put that aside and let's not rewrite history. The expectation right now should be that USC makes the playoff, even against this schedule. Chad Bowden was very clear. If you're at USC, you should make the playoff. That's what he said. I agree with that. So we're going to get to find out whether they're in a position to do it. Mark, go ahead.
Let me just close it with this statement. It never made any sense to say, well, 2027 is the calendar we have to circle. You're going to be without Jade Mayava, so you're breaking in a new quarterback, probably Jonas Williams, who's going to have minimal experience. You'll be breaking in a new offensive line. I mean, so many things will be changing. I'm just not sure where all of a sudden, where everybody said, yeah, 2027 is our year. I'd never heard that stated by anybody on the coaching staff. And in the locker room, that's not how players and coaches are wired. They're not saying, well, 2026 is the bridge. That's Come on. I just don't, like you said, where are the fans coming from with this nonsense?
Well, look, when they didn't pick up some of the guys in the portal that I thought probably could make a difference on this defense, I assumed it's because they figured 2027 was the year. But you know what? That's not what they said the other night. So fine. That's good. We're all on the same page. USC should win 10 games and make the playoff this year. That's the expectation that Chad Bowden has set. Lincoln Riley was very clear. You don't come to USC to win 8 or 9 games. I have the roster that I like. Cool. Now let's talk about the coaching staff that may or may not be able to get that done, because we've had some changes. We talked about Gary Patterson and Mike Eckler the other day, but we've had a couple of additional, couple of additions, I should have said, since then. So let's start there. Eric, what do we know about the new guys for the USC coaching staff at this point?
Well, the one I want to hit on, Paul Gonzalez, I think is big coming over from Baylor. He was there. There's two guys that Gary Patterson has had sort of long time connections with at TCU. Paul Gonzalez is one of them, and so Chad Bowden said this too, is like, we love our assistants. We'd love to keep everybody. We want, like, that was the whole thing. Lincoln Riley, I thought one of the most interesting quotes that he said during that whole Alamo Bowl thing was, we don't want to hit the reset button on defense. When we look for a coordinator, we like what we have. We want to just kind of keep pushing forward. But it never made sense to tell Gary Patterson, here's your guys. You got to install this whole thing with guys that you don't have a connection to. So I think Mike Eckler's huge. You want to talk about an offensive mind in Riley, a defensive mind in Patterson. Mike Eckler is the third point of the triangle with special teams. And obviously we've talked, 40 minutes or whatever about linebackers. Like that's not a small position. You want to list the positions, that one's in bold at the top. So he's significant. We could probably do a show just on him. But Gonzalez coming in to help with whatever that is, right? Safeties, corners, the whole thing, that Doug Belk kind of top-down secondary grasp that he has is huge. And Gary Patterson has always worked with safeties the same way Lincoln Riley has always worked with quarterbacks. Like, it's been the quarterback coach the offensive coordinator, whatever you want to do it, he's spending time with that group. But getting him someone who can come over and, yeah, I got this. I can run a lot of you want to spend time with the defensive line today, linebacker, whatever, like this is gonna go. That makes a ton of sense to me and should speed up the process because it's not like you're getting players, right? When Dan Lynn came over from UCLA, you got a no coaches, but a couple kind of shortcuts and John Humphrey and Kamari Ramsey to come over and help players and that sort of thing. Patterson wasn't going to get players, so a coach to do that, I think is very significant. And I
Yeah, and
love Doug Belk, right? I think Doug Belk was great at USC. Like
yeah,
he's not a guy that I would have said you got to get rid of Doug Belk. But when you look at it going forward, again, you just handcuffs off Gary Patterson. Like like he's got to have reign to do what is going to be best for him and that defense.
I also like Doug Belk, and I thought Belk did a really nice job after his first year developing Jalen Smith. We talked about how there's some guys on this defense that have to take a huge leap forward. Those leap forwards do happen sometimes, right? Jalen Smith took a huge leap forward before his last year. He was I thought a liability in Grinch's scheme and just struggled not consistently but pretty close to it. And Belk and Dan Lynn turned him into a superstar in a year. So these sorts of jumps do happen. So Belk is not a guy I would have wanted to get rid of, but at the same time, it's hard to tell safeties at USC. Yeah, your new coach is Gary Patterson, and he's bringing in the guy who's been coaching safeties for a long time, and tell them anything other than you guys are fine, right? Right, your position coach, your defensive coordinator, they will absolutely develop you as good as anybody in the country because that's what Gary Patterson does, and he uses safeties in ways that allow those guys to make a lot of plays and make a name for themselves. So now we also have look we have confirmation that Coach Henney interviewed with the Rams. They hired somebody else. There are rumors at least that
Cowboys.
he was, excuse me, Dallas. He was with the Rams. Yes. And there are rumors at least that he might be interviewing with Washington. I don't know whether that's the case. So I guess it's safe to say that Henney's status is at least still up in the air, although, he's still recruiting, he's still around. There's been no announcement. But either he is interested in finding other options or he has been encouraged to see if there are other options. And I don't know which one it is, but there seems to at least be the possibility that USC may need to find themselves another defensive line coach. Yes, Mark?
Well, what's interesting is the Cowboys hired the guy who kind of worked under um, Coach Henney with the Rams.
Yeah.
Man, brain fart there. So here's where I come from with this. If you're interviewing, it doesn't matter why. You've got one foot out the door, whether you're being asked to kind of pursue another avenue or whether, you know what, maybe coaching college kids and babysitting their egos isn't for me. It doesn't really matter. This will be his second interview this offseason if the speculation about Washington is true. So yeah, Eric, you brought it up. Lincoln Riley said after the Alamo Bowl, he feels great, fantastic, loves the staff, doesn't want to hit the reset button. Again, the follow-up, the actions never seem to back up the words. That's all I'm saying about this whole thing.
I think assistant coaches interviewing is different than head coaches interviewing, right? Assistants move on; they find other opportunities, and if that
But this
happens,
is
it
a
happens.
lateral move back to the NFL. This isn't your typical, going to become a defensive coordinator somewhere else.
Right. Now, obviously, if he had a defense coordinator opportunity, nobody would say that. But even if it's just a move back to the NFL, I mean, if he's decided, and I'm not saying he has, if he's decided that the NFL is a better fit for him, okay, there's no problem with that. So I don't necessarily have a problem with him interviewing. The question is, well, where's this uncertainty going to lead? And I suspect you would have two reactions from USC fans. From some USC fans, you would have absolute panic because Henne was a fantastic recruit, still is, and he's brought in the best group of young defensive linemen USC's had since Pete Carroll's day. That's true. And so, in a day and age when guys can just pick up and leave anytime they want, including if you're Bear Alexander after game 5, then that makes you nervous. At the same time, I suspect a lot of USC fans would also say, yeah, but his group didn't really play very well, or frankly, very hard last year. So if Gary Patterson wants to find himself a new defensive line coach, I can live with that. And I think both of those responses would be reasonable reactions to the news if he decided to leave.
If that happens, I want USC to react as quickly as Notre Dame did getting BYU. Ed Orgeron, you got him in the Rolodex. Call him, say, come back, do what you do best. You get the recruiting, you get the defensive line evaluation, you get the defensive line development. It is the perfect fit.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I think there are rumors of another possible defensive back coach. I don't know what's going to come of that. And I don't know what he would do. It sounds like USC's pretty locked in with Trovon Reed, which, he's also a fantastic recruiter and probably a guy you want to keep around. So we'll see. I guess the point is that we've had some changes in the staff. We may have some more coming. It's just hard to know at this point. And if somebody leaves, then obviously most USC fans will be like Mark, and they're saying, well, I hope we hurry up and hire this guy and don't make us wait a month and a half. But knowing Lincoln Riley, we will probably wait 3, 4, 5 weeks before that position is filled. So just get ready for it, people. It'll be fine. You don't need to worry about it.
And Bowden said that too. He said, we tell we're getting someone for you guys, right? Like we're not hiring a local volunteer parent to come down and coach defense at USC. Like it's a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator that they took 3 weeks or whatever it was. Yeah, they got a guy. So there is something behind those words of, look, if we need to make a change, like what at this point, what assistant coaching hire, either in the immediacy or kind of how it's played out, like what's the percentage of them that you go, man, that was a miss. Oh, they didn't get that right. Like it's in the realm of like running back additions for Lincoln Riley right now. There's just not a whole lot. I mean, it's not 100%, but there aren't a lot that I can go through and go, man, they really missed that. Man, that was really underwhelming. Oh, that guy just didn't work out. Like they've done well. They've done well. I think there's every reason to think that if Henne leaves, if someone leaves, if whoever leaves, yeah, they're gonna go get a guy. They're gonna be okay.
Greg, you were gonna say something?
My bigger concern is the recruiting end of it. When you decide to go to USC and you're a defensive lineman, you're saying, I want coach, I'm going because of Coach Henderson. He coached Donald, et cetera, et cetera. And no matter what, assistant coaches are really big when it comes to recruiting because that's going to be your coach. And all of a sudden, right at the beginning here, in my opinion, I'm very disappointed. Not because I don't understand it. I'm just disappointed that Henderson really, to me, if I was a betting man, I think he's not going to be the SC defensive line coach. Once you showcase, I'm going to go interview here, and as you brought up, go interview with Washington. Okay, what do they all have in common? You're interviewing with somebody else. You're not saying, okay. And my feeling is, what do the players that, not necessarily just the players who are already at SC in terms of played last year, what are about the new players that they are bringing in, that we're all saying this guy's really going to be good, and they all go, well, I want to be coached by Coach Henderson. How in this unpredictable portal situation where anything can happen. A guy can sit there and say, "Oh, I'm leaving," even before spring ball. Any of it, to me, is really difficult to rein it all in. And if he comes back and he coaches, great, that's great. But I'm not expecting that to happen. And is Nua the guy? And it'll be interesting because I think when uh, Patterson brings in people, they know his system. They can teach that system. And if he brings in a defensive line coach, or they have to, I would say, based on what we've seen, he's going to look for somebody who knows his system and what he expects. So we'll see.
Hopefully these kids who are committing to USC don't come with the expectation that their position coach is definitely going to be there for 3 or 4 years. Eric Henderson never intended to be at USC forever. He wants to be a defensive coordinator if he can be, right? Of course he does, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I would like to think that these guys come in knowing that that Henderson's their coach right now, but that if he leaves, that Lincoln Riley will find an elite replacement for him, because otherwise, if I had a high school kid that I was coaching or a parent of, I would not be telling them that they should expect that their position coach when they go to college is going to be there for 3 or 4 years. It just doesn't.
But let me ask you something,
Yeah.
Chris. Let me ask you, how would you feel if you decided on a school as a player and you were a player, and all of a sudden you find out that the guy that recruited you, and you said, he's my man. That's why it's not a question of whether he stays for 3 years or for 2 years, but if the guy leaves before you've even started spring practice, how would you feel?
I mean, I'm sure I'd be disappointed, but I did have position coaches change, and when I played, and look, Nick Saban cycled through assistant coaches every single year because Nick Saban had a program that made assistant coaches very desirable. He lost guys all the time. I just I don't think it makes sense for any player to commit to a school because, well, I love that position coach. Yeah, that's one reason, but you have to have a better reason than that. And I say that because I suspect that guys like Jamie Winfield probably did have additional reasons for choosing USC, because Jamie Winfield probably knew that if Eric Henderson had a chance to be a defensive coordinator, that he would take the job. Of course he would. So the answer is, Greg, I don't know. I'm sure they'd be disappointed, but if he's replaced by somebody who's elite and they connect with him on a personal level very quickly, then it seems to me that the damage is contained just fine. But we'll see, or maybe we won't. Maybe he comes back next year. I don't know. All right, guys. Before we play 10 questions, we had a recruiting event. The Trojan Olympics had a bunch of juniors on campus, elite recruits. It looks like it's probably going to lead to at least one commitment from a wide receiver, but that's not official. We'll probably end up talking about that next week. Anything that we should know about this last recruiting weekend? I don't want to pass by this subject entirely without at least raising it.
Marcus Fakato got the red carpet treatment from Chad Bowden. I mean, Scott talked about it on the WeAreSC message board. He wrote a story about it. He was made an offer he probably won't be able to refuse. So, Chad was able to share a couple of other things on that day with Scott and I. It's going to be a very small class, especially compared to what USC just brought in, probably half the number. A lot of people are saying, well, 20, I think the sweet spot is probably like 17 commitments they're looking for, but you got to make them all elite. It's interesting. Chad Bowden said it's always culture over talent every time, but you're looking at bringing in the number one guys at their positions. You're talking about Marcus Fakato and Honor Fala'ave. You get those two guys, you've got your recruiting class is going to be good, no matter who else comes in behind those guys. So if they can pull, the top guys in California, mission accomplished.
Culture obviously matters, but when you're bringing in guys like Winfield and Wavell and Sermons and guys like that, Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure culture mattered, but it also matters that they look like future NFL players. That matters
Culture,
quite a
look,
bit too.
look, culture is guys who help you win a whole lot of football games. Like
Yeah.
that's it, right? Bad culture guys, you lose a lot of football games. Good culture guys, you win a lot of football games. So it's in there, right? It's yeah, it's personality, it's talent, it's all of that kind of stuff. That's a good culture is a team that wins a lot of football games. That's ultimately the biggest thing. And really good players help you win a lot of football games. But yeah, those are, you look at California guys, those are the two guys. Marcus Fogg has talked, I think, a lot of lean about leaving the area and that sort of stuff. And there's a handful of guys in that 27 class that have sort of started their process like that, right? Dante Wright, a corner, is already committed to Georgia. So USC is going to have to fight a little bit of that pull and they did a great job in 26. Like a ton of those guys were out of here and they eventually brought them all back in. So that's going to be the fight. Yeah, you're picking and choosing at the top of California, I think, for these guys, getting Fatu on campus as many times as possible, right? The Tom flip. Don't see him, don't see him, don't see him. Now he lives here. He's got an apartment on campus seemingly because he's never not there. That's what you're looking for, I think, with him.
Um, okay, we're moving on to 10 questions. Guys, we've been talking for a long time, and I don't want to go too long. So we just can't have Eric can't give 13 answers to every question. He can't. We're just not going to allow it this time. He'll get disqualified if he does that. We're not going to have long explanations. If you give a good answer, you don't need an explanation. You only need an explanation if your answer is terrible. So I'm going to start with a question that nobody wants to answer. You must pick one Bruin to be a starter on this year's USC team. Doesn't have to be a current UCLA player, could be a past UCLA player, but it has to be a Bruin. Who do you pick? Mark Culkin, start us off. What Bruin would you put on USC's team?
You are so right, Chris. These questions are terrible.
I know.
But with
I know.
that,
I love it. I love it. Answer this question nobody wants to answer.
with that said, we talked about linebackers earlier. I'm going to go back to the safety position. Give me Kenny easily. Call it a day.
It's a pretty good one. Great catch. Who you got?
In the system the way it is today, offensively, I'm going with Gary Beeman.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, really? Does that shock you? I know that most people didn't get to see him play unless they're, back in the 60s and whatever, but
No.
he would fit in today. He would be awesome.
All right. Eric, who do you got?
I wrote down four names. Mark took one of them. I'm not gonna list the other. Greg did not take one of them. I'm not gonna list the other three.
Okay.
It's a balance between position need and talent. And I'm going what I think position need is. I'm gonna say Latu off the edge. You give me one guy that I can put on this team and guarantee 21 and a half tackles for loss, 13 sacks, two picks, a Lombardi Award winner. I'd put that on this team.
I feel pretty good about that.
Sure.
I might take Ken Norton Jr. too. Number two, you must move one current USC player to a different position. Who are you moving? Greg Katz.
I'm moving Walter Matthews from tight end to an offensive tackle.
We've been trying to do that for years. Okay, but
I
I'm
keep
with
trying.
you. I'm with you. He looks like an offensive tackle to me. Eric McKinney, who are you moving?
Yeah, he's the one. And you'd have to have full buy-in. What I think is interesting about this question specifically is nobody else. Like this is the first time I can remember a roster where there really are not a lot of guys. I mean, if corner to safety or whatever, that sort of stuff that they do anyway. But I don't see a lot of like, oh, this corner could play receiver or this running back could play safety. Like that's what's surprising to me about that question.
So you don't have an answer? Is that your answer?
Well, it's Greg's. That's the one.
Oh, okay. Mark, do you have a different answer, or you go with Greg's too?
I wish I did. I'm going to default to Greg right now.
All right,
Eric,
whatever. You
Eric
guys.
spells out
No,
perfect.
I don't look. You know what? If the question's too hard, it's too hard. Number three, who is the best USC coaching staff in history? Mark Holkin, who is it?
You know, people probably won't like this answer, but I'm going to go with the 2001 USC coaching staff because I saw what Pete Carroll took over, what Paul Hackett left, and there was some talent, but I watched that team get better week after week after week. And that's what you're looking for is development on a weekly basis from your program.
It was certainly a coaching staff that helped turn around a culture pretty quickly. So Pete, Norm, Tim Davis, Ed Orgeron. All right, Greg Katz. I think you're going to go back to a John McKay or maybe a John Robinson staff, and I hope you do. Who do you got?
Well, not John Robinson. He did a great job his first time around, and he recruited very well. John McKay or Pete Carroll. I do like what Pete Carroll did with Ed Orgeron, and they were really tough. But I will just throw out this: John McKay's coaching staff. If you look where those coaches ended up, a lot of them in the NFL and stuff, that was a great recruiting group too.
Yeah, and I like USC's offensive line coach very much, young guy. But John McKay had maybe one of the legendary O-line coaches of all time with Hudson Houck and some other guys. Eric McKinney, best USC coaching staff in history.
Yeah, I'm going to say 76, which is interesting because it's the year after McKay left, so I don't get him. But for me, it has to be a staff with Marv Goo and Hudson Houck both on it, right? And so you give me that. John Jackson's coaching running backs. Norv Turner's on that team. Bob Toledo. I know there's the aftermath of that, but again, you look at success.
You went overboard. You promoted two Bruins already in this game.
It's tough. But yeah, so that was it. I like right the Carol Chow, all that stuff's great. Goo and Houck on the same one. That was sort of my starting point.
That's pretty solid. All right. Which USC player in history, doesn't have to be a current player, would you most like to have watched play in high school? Greg Katz.
You know, as bad as this is going to sound, I actually wanted to watch O.J. Simpson in high school. I know he went to community college, but he was unreal. And
I
so
don't think
I
that
would like to
sounds
have seen
bad.
him in
I
high
think
school.
OJ in high school must have been something to behold. Okay, I like that answer. Mark Holken, who you got?
I'm going to go with my probably my favorite Trojan of all time, Ricky Bell. I would love to have seen the horse in high school just killing people.
Eric?
John Arnett. So being from San Diego, I did get to watch Reggie Bush in high school, and John Arnett is Reggie Bush pre Reggie Bush. I think that would have been fun.
I think Junior Seau would have been fun watching high school too, but there are a lot of guys on that list. Okay, here you go. You're going to choose your defense. I'm going to give you three options. Ready? Number one, Troy Polamalu, Chris Claiborne, and Leonard Williams. Good group. Number two, Adoree Jackson, Junior Seau, and Sean Cody. Number three, Ronnie Lott, Richard Batman Wood, and Tim Ryan, who had over 20 sacks his last year at USC from a defensive tackle position. Which one do you have? Greg Katz.
I'll take Troy, Chris,
Williams,
and the big cat Williams. They were just.
I mean, there's no wrong answer in this.
No, but as I look as a group of three combined, that would be my group.
McKinney.
I'll say C and win, right? Because I picked Ronnie Lott.
Yeah,
like that. Cheat code. I mean that's where I lean. If Greg's taking A, then I'll go C.
I mean, look, you get 20 sacks from defensive tackle, you get a multiple-time All-American, and you get the greatest safety of all time. That's pretty good.
So Richard Wood and Ronnie Lott, I'm actually okay with them as my complete back seven. Like that's fine. That's fine. Cover everybody back there.
Since B wasn't taken, I'll take B. But Chris, let me ask you this question: in the Oklahoma drill, who wins between A and B? Because that's the answer to this question.
I think Junior Seau terrorizes everybody. I mean, Chris Claiborne was an unbelievable football player. All those guys. Look, there's nobody on this list that wasn't a great football player. But Junior Seau was physically the most impressive guy I think I've ever seen, right? I mean, he was just shockingly big and fast and sudden and just wild. Just wild. Okay, I like all those answers, but that's because I did a good job crafting the question. Number 6, two-part question. What would the average Big Ten team, whoever's going to finish right in the middle of the pack, 4-5, 5-4, how would they fare against next year's Notre Dame schedule? Give me a record. And who should be more embarrassed right now? The rich guys whose names are in the Epstein documents or the person responsible for making Notre Dame's football schedule? Eric McKinney.
Look, I'm not going to touch the second part of that question. I'm not going to compare college football to anything going on in real life and that sort of thing. Like that.
I'm not saying those guys are guilty. Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
not, I'm not touching the second part. One is every 10 wins. 10 wins. You moonwalk to 10 wins as a competent team against that schedule. Yes.
Yeah, Minnesota's going 10-2 against that group, without question. Mark, you're deep in thought. I'm curious what you're thinking about. This was not a challenging question.
I'm trying to think about Notre Dame's schedule off the top of my head. I know it's got like 3 or 4 Big Ten teams on it. It's got a few ACC teams on it. So I don't know. It's a manageable. What would Wisconsin's record be? Because
I think BYU is the second best team on that.
Wisconsin's
schedule.
on that schedule. So
I don't know. I mean, Wisconsin won what, 3 games last year, something like that. But maybe they'll be an average Big Ten team this year. I hope so.
It's an 8-9 win schedule.
Okay, I think 12-0. Greg, go ahead. I'm just
I'm going to abstain from this question because I need more information on it that I could see. I mean, I've seen Notre Dame's schedule. I don't think it's horrendous, but based on what the other teams have to play, it leaves a lot of things unsatisfactory for sure.
Greg Katz is a conscientious objector, and Eric McKinney was a partial conscientious objector. I appreciate that. All right, number 7. Will Jaden Mayava earn a trip to New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation next year? Greg?
Well, I hope for his sake he does, but I don't think he's going to be
invited.
No,
man. Just no. Come on. Yes, no.
You, Chris? N-O.
Okay. Mark Culkin, yes or no?
Yes.
Eric McKinney, yes or no?
No.
Yeah, the answer is no, because they're not going to win enough games. But it would be nice, and I think he'll put up good numbers. All right, give me one change that would improve the college football playoff. Mark Culkin.
Can it be this? All right. Start the season a week earlier and get rid of the conference championship games.
Okay, I like that. Greg Katz?
Well, since we know they're going to have 12 teams, again, unfortunately, I would rather see 16, but I'll go with no buys.
No buys. I would like that too. Eric McKinney?
Home games. More home games for better seats.
Okay, here we go. You got to choose one pairing to coach your college football team. And this is when these guys are in their props. All right. You have Pete Carroll and his offensive coordinator, Norm Chow. You have Urban Meyer and his defensive coordinator, Kyle Whittingham. You have Nick Saban and his offensive coordinator, Lane Kiffin. Which pair are you taking? Greg Katz?
Well, it's unfair because I'm SC at heart. But I think if I had to take a choice, I'd take Urban Meyer and Kyle Whittingham. That's my opinion.
Can't go wrong with that group. Eric McKinney, who do you got?
No, it's Carroll and Chow. Any USC fan that doesn't want to relive that run, I don't know what to tell you. I've seen what they've done. I'm okay for that again.
Imagine Pete Carroll and Norm Chow and that coaching staff in the playoff era. USC's still winning playoff games today.
I agree with all that. Although I will say, Urban Meyer with Kyle Whittingham is a hell of a pairing. Nick Saban and Lane. I mean, Nick Saban and just about anybody would be a great pairing. But Lane is pretty good. All right, here we go. The last question, and also one that nobody wants to answer, and you have to do it anyway. USC must wear an alternative uniform.
Oh,
And it
God.
cannot be in the store. You cannot say we're going back to the 1972 uniforms. You can't do it. A brand new uniform.
How drunk
You're,
were you when you put these questions together, Chris?
I did it just to make you angry, and that's I thought it'd be good. I thought it'd be a good video. All right, and you're in charge of designing them. What are they going to look like, Eric McKinney? How are you going to ruin perfection?
I can't look. So the answer is pass. Like full pass. I'm never gonna run black. What I would like, see over Mark's right shoulder in the end zone, right on his background, right, like the diamond
Yeah.
thing there. I could run that around some shoulder pads and that kind of thing, but I'm not flipping the cardinal in gold and wearing cardinal pants or anything like that. I think it's little touches.
Okay, so he's going with diamonds. Greg Katz, what are you doing?
I hate this question.
I know. I figured you would.
You get all the credit in the world for doing it. Okay, just because it's all fake, I'll say I want them in gold uniforms like we see the yellow in the end zone there, and with cardinal numbers and the helmet. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll go with a gold helmet, not Notre Dame gold, but kind of the same color as that end zone.
You heard it here
I'll still
first.
put this.
Greg
I'll
Katz
still
is in
put the.
favor of gold Notre Dame helmets at USC. Mark Culkin, what are you doing?
Black is not going to be in the choice. So look, give me an all white uniform with the cardinal helmet, and you can flex in some gold and cardinal trim throughout the uniform itself.
I'd be willing to go with cardinal pants and maybe the interlocking SC logo on the helmet. I'd hate it, but I'd hate it less than some of the other options. I'd certainly hate it less than going with black unis or something like that.
Just
But
kill me with that.
fortunately, it's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. All right, that's it. We're done, guys. Good show. Appreciate the insight. We'll see if we have more coaching staff changes by next week. I think it's possible, but probably not likely. So next week, who knows what we'll talk about. We'll find something. Thanks for joining us. Until then, fight on, everybody.